Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you. I am excited to get this started. We got Randy joining us, we got Dean joining us. This is going to be an awesome conversation. Now, if you haven't yet, make sure you are liking the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we drop these on Fridays. And I am excited. Let's get some intros and then we'll jump into a convo. Randy, how about yourself? First 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? Hit it.
Awesome. Hey guys, how you doing? It's Randy Turner out of Ottawa, Ontario. I own and operate a business called Direct Action Combat Performance, where I provide tactical training for military law enforcement and a bit of a side junction to general public.
Absolutely. Dean, how about yourself?
Dean Goble out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm active duty Green Beret out of 10th Special Forces Group, and I currently work for the Special Forces Foundation doing nonprofit work as well.
Outstanding. I love it. Shaun, how you doing out there? How's the mountains treating you?
Things are good out here, but right away, given the guests and I follow them pretty closely on social media, I have two questions, one for each guy, and I kind of want to use the opportunity to maybe build it into a conversation, but there'll be two very different conversations. And so the first one is to Randy, and that is, and it's not a simple answer. It'll require some conversation, of course, but I've been tracking Randy, and I saw that in his most recent post, he was talking about how he has the privilege to be able to recently work with a group of young men, and he's either leading them or mentoring them or training them in some capacity. And it wasn't a cryptic message that Randy put out, but it was along the lines of he's privileged to be engaged with them and more to follow, ... So I want to hear more about that. I want to hear more about what Randy's got up his sleeve, because as I read it, it felt like it was an important thing, and it felt like it was something that I wanted to know more about. So, and if I want to know more about it, I'm sure others do as well. And then my second question is to Dean, and it's along the lines of, I see that you've just recently been down at SHOT Show, and I saw some of the characters that you were bumping into, and trying to read between the lines, it looked like you had not just met some cool people, but you were creating some relationships with some opportunities that are coming up in the future. So I'd like to hear more about that. And not specifically, I'm not talking about, I'm interested in, what t-shirts you're selling, Dean, or what hats you got, but it really looked like there was some meat and potatoes to the meetings that you had down there. So I'm curious as to where that led. So either one of those conversations I'm super interested in.
Well, let's start with Randy, and then we'll work our way back towards SHOT Show after we get through that. So, Randy, tell us some more.
Yeah, no problem. So what transpired there last week was I had a few young up-and-coming soldiers who they traveled in from Ottawa from across the country to provide. What I provided for them was 3 days of specific detailed intensive training. So these gentlemen, they either have aspirations of trying out for JTF2, CSOR, or Sea Drivers. So somewhere in the CANSOF command is where these guys have aspirations to find employment. So what I did is I created a mini selection preparation type of style of training. So we spent half days on the range, half days on the mat, ran them through a variety of skill development on the range, as well as some skill development in self-defense on the mat. We integrated a little bit of mindset, performance on demand, mental strengthening, as well as physical conditioning. So, it was designed to challenge them, but also provide some mentorship, provide some coaching, and provide some tactical, technical skills that, regardless of what happens when they do try out for these specific units, they'll have these skills wherever they end up in their careers. They'll have these skills to build upon. So really, this was one of more to come. It was really well received. The guys that showed up were definitely engaged. They spent a lot of money and a lot of time to partake in this training, and at the end of the day, I put it on them. So they were tested mentally, physically, emotionally. I pushed each and every one of them outside their comfort zone, gave them a lot of skills that they can hone on their own time. Then now that they have the skills, they have an understanding of the foundation, and they can build on those from their home units when they go back. And this is something I think I'm going to do more in the future. My goal right now would be to run one in the spring and then run another one in the fall. And these are for serious contenders only. These would be for guys that are legitimate about, wanting to do good things with their career. Bring these guys together. They all share very similar goals, very similar in mindset. And what I hope to do is just provide some mentorship for them, provide some guidance in terms of what does it take to succeed during selection? What types of things will they expect in terms of emotional, physical, or psychological challenges? Now, keep that in mind. Obviously, selection is designed in a manner not to give anything away, right? So there are opportunities for these guys to ask questions, and of course, I'll entertain those questions. Should those questions, waver into the gray zone where, I just simply won't talk about it, then I'll just kind of guide it and veer it back into the right direction. Because at the end of the day, when they go on selection, it behooves them to know as little as possible, because the unit that's assessing them is going to get a legitimate, snapshot view of what these guys bring to the table. So, this is something that we trialed. It went really well, and I think this is something we're going to push forward in the future.
I like that. And for those that don't know, I just want to clarify something for you guys. In the Canadian Special Operations Command, or CANSOFCOM, the the three elements that are out there are JTF2, which is the Tier 1 counterterrorism organization with the Canadian military, and then you have the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, which is, I guess, similar from what I've talked to people within that regiment. It's similar to the Ranger setup, and then Sajiru is the Canadian Joint Incident Response Unit, is the CBRN, Chemical, Biological, Radiological Response Team within the Special Operations Command. So, just for those that don't know, I wanted to clarify that, because I saw Dean kind of like, what are all these acronyms going on?
I got about 50% of it.
So good. And then the question that brings up, Randy, and I want to ask Dean and Shaun this: going into selection with some knowledge versus zero knowledge, just entering into it blind. Because Randy, you said, having these guys enter into it without any kind of prefixed mindsets or anything, but it almost seems like it would help to have some knowledge of what you're going to be getting yourself into. But at the same time, I also understand why you wouldn't want it. So what do you guys think? Dean, I'm going to start with you. Going into selection for Green Berets, different?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to both. Like everything else, we get asked all the time on like teaching somebody how to shoot. Is it better to teach somebody how to shoot who has already been shooting with a lot of bad habits for a couple of years, or somebody who knows absolutely nothing? And then from the very beginning, you can kind of set them up for success by giving them just what is truly needed and kind of get away from everything that's kind of messing them up. But there's always pros and cons to both. With our selection process, we do try to give them just enough, kind of like what Randy was saying, just enough to kind of get them in the right mindset of where they're walking towards, let them kind of see what expectations may be, kind of push them to the limit, so they're just like, oh, okay, I'm not just going to just walk over this, and start to take it a little more seriously. But at the same time, we don't tell them every single event that's coming up, because we do want to be able to, articulate and see them and watch them in action and see their leadership skills start to come up, their critical thinking skills start to come out. What do they do in these situations? And if they already have the answers, then you're not really getting a true assessment of that person. And that's ultimately what we want to get, to be able to be like, okay, while we may be able to give you some of the answers in the future, you're going to walk into a lot of ambiguous, situations, and you're not going to have the answers, and you're going to have to figure them out just like you are now. So we want to be able to assess that. And I think that's a huge key, because, probably much just like CANSOF, we're sent, throughout the world, and usually we get about 5% of the answer, and the rest of it you're told to figure out. And so that's a huge part of our assessment for sure.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I had the privilege, and it was a one-time opportunity for Canada, where they started up the teams, and the guys who showed up first were really the only guys who knew nothing. And then every course after that, the information started dribbling out as to, do you need to levitate? Do you need to be able to monkey climb to the moon? You know, all of the things that you may or may not have to do. But when we started off, we knew nothing, literally zero. And so you just showed up based on all of the things that you'd kicked ass in over your career. And hopefully it was enough to get you through selection and then get you through the entire final phases. And so, again, I showed up knowing nothing and got a blank slate look at the program. And then after that, I had the privilege of being directing staff on all phases of all the process. And so I got to see it through a different set of eyes. Now, I wouldn't be the right guy anymore to really make any formal proclamations on how the process could or couldn't be done better or worse. Randy would be, because Randy is current and I am not. And also, Randy served longer in the teams than I did and had a much better snapshot of what it means to be an effective, efficient operator in the modern team. So my opinions are less relevant than Randy's opinions. But my opinion is that I think, personally, I'd prefer for someone to show up knowing nothing about the process. However, the spot or the slot, the position for that one man is so important that you want to set them up for a level of success where you get to see the best out of them rather than not supporting them at all and seeing the worst out of them. I'd rather see the best out of them, because then the bad habits can be cleaned up. The things that need to be improved can be cleaned up. I want to see their bad habits for sure, but I want to have them on the start line set up for the most amount of success. Because again, the investment in that individual on the start line is massive. There's some really talented people that are standing, observing all of the individuals on that start line, and their time is worth a lot of money, or it's worth a lot of street time, I suppose. And so you want someone to show up and you want them to win. You want them to be successful, but you don't want them to have an unfair advantage. So it's finding maybe the middle line between knowing nothing and knowing everything. I think a person should just know enough that it sets them up to demonstrate their excellence, not demonstrate their secret sauce knowledge.
Interesting. Randy, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, yeah. So the intent with this is, to get exposure to these guys, get to know them a little bit. They're already members of the Canadian Forces. They're already doing good things in whatever their home unit is. They want more for themselves. So I look at it like an opportunity to mentor and help these guys and coach them. But you're absolutely right, without giving anything away. And I've shared this with these guys, and I've looked them in the eye and I said, at the end of the day, I'm helping you, I'm mentoring you, but you're the one that's doing the work. You're the one that's going to have to perform. You're the one that's going to be in the arena on the day. I won't be there with you. So it would be unfair to the unit, and it would also be unfair to that individual member if I gave them all the answers, right? And to be completely honest, like, I've been out of the unit now for 3.5 years. Things change. I wouldn't share anything from the details of selection anyway, because I'm a professional. But that being said, things change every year. So what I saw when I last worked at the unit could be very, very different to what these guys are going to and see in terms of the testing and evaluation. That being said, what I can help them with is understanding what it means to persevere through tough times, understand what it means to be, exposed when you see a limitation or you're faced with a limitation that maybe you weren't aware of prior to that. So that's what I'm trying to do, is help these guys, bridge the gap between their strengths and limitations.
I got another question on this one, and it's references to special operations in general. Again, I was not, so I really have a lot of questions about this. But the 18 XRay program down in the U.S., right? That is direct entry from civilian street into special operations. into the course, I should say. It doesn't direct entry into special operations. You get to go to the selection, all that stuff. And in Canada, you have to have 3 years minimum service before you can even apply. And I'm wondering, Dean specifically, have you noticed a difference between some of the guys that are prior enlisted, they've been in for a little while, and then do the selection versus the 18 X-ray troops that show up and just give her?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, for me, and I mean, I guess in my personal experience, I've seen 18 X-rays, and they've ranged all the way from a kid who is completely lost, just doesn't have the confidence yet, to an 18 X-ray who is already a CEO of a great company, but he just wanted to serve. So he was like, "Hey, you know what? I just want to get in the fight, and I'm kind of tired of doing a 9 to 5." So I've personally seen a wide plethora of different candidates who've come through the 18 X-ray program. So I don't mind the 18 X-ray program. I think we have a lot of really great recruits, and I've known a few who've done really well. However, I have also seen that those who have done a few years and kind of been able to be mentored, they kind of come in with a little more confidence. They understand the military a little bit better. They understand the end states, and you can really see that. However, you usually don't compete with the 18 X-rays when it comes to physical fitness, though. Those guys, what they do to them all the way up until they go to selection is absolutely amazing. When they show up, you can tell who has an 18 X-ray because they're going to whip you on a 2 mile time, and you can tell that they spend 90% of their day they're either eating, working out, or studying something, and then it's rinse and repeat. While you were in the infantry or artillery, wherever you're coming from, you may not have been given that latitude. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough of the 18 X-ray program. Two friends that come to mind immediately who were both 18 X-rays were some of the best GBs we had in the compound.
Interesting. Shaun, what are you thinking on this?
Well, I like the model of the X-ray program. I really do. I like the fact that some resources are dedicated specifically to optimizing in the most efficient manner someone's success on the course. And so that's taken someone right off the street. And as I understand it, Dean, the X-ray program requires someone to have some sort of inbuilt experience, whether, as you stated, either a high performer as a CEO or a high performer as an athlete or a high performer as a something or other. I've always understood it as you had to have something to offer rather than you just stumbled off of a bus at the Greyhound bus depot and now you want to be an X-ray. So I think that a person has to have a certain je ne sais quoi or a certain something in order to get involved with the program, and then they are hyper optimized. I love the idea of being hyper optimized. I mean, best case scenario is someone who's been in the infantry a few years and then they move into a hyper optimized program to set them up for the start line of the program. So I like the idea of X-ray, mostly because not only does it create potentially creates a good individual, but what it does is the system is now obligated to learn how to do things better, to deliver better programming. And so whatever that cell is that runs the X-ray program, they're probably on the daily out there looking for always better ways to do it, always better ways to educate it, always better ways to get it up to speed faster. And so I think that there's a trickle down from that. That's trickling down into the regular military that surrounds the X-ray program to some degree, even if it's only just surface exposures of people who are in the program talking to someone who isn't in the program. At least there's some sort of bleed over on that trickle down. So I do like the idea of X-rays. But I also feel that maybe the best material to work with is experienced material. And that's why I would always, given the choice, I would always defer to someone who's been in the trenches for a while rather than someone who just got off the Greyhound bus just the other day. And so I think that there's an important distinction there for sure.
Interesting. Randy, what do you think?
If I may add,
sorry, go for it, Dean. Yeah.
Just real quick, it's kind of rumored. I don't have any proof to prove it, but everybody speaks about it. But we've always joked around that the 18 X-ray program was mostly built for marketing at the beginning, Because what they don't tell you is if you don't make it through selection, then you become infantry for whatever unit you may go to. So the big Army in the marketing was able to say, hey, you use special forces and all the marketing behind it, but then fill the ranks of infantry and anybody else they could for any other MOS if they didn't make it. So, food for thought.
Interesting. Randy, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's I was going to pile on to the logistic piece of that. So once somebody comes in, if we were to do something like that in Canada, for example, they come in. It would take a lot of manpower to run something like that and to do it professionally squared away. It's going to take a lot of people to get that off the ground, from internally. So, a lot of uniformed professionals just to run something like that. And then if you were to take a civilian, turn them into, an infantry soldier, that offer them the opportunity to go special forces. If they were unsuccessful, now they are ours in terms of the Canadian Armed Forces as a whole to take care of them and find a place for them and see how they could be value added in some other element. What that looked like, how somebody would sign a contract, whether it was a 2-year or 3-year contract. If things didn't work out for them in the special forces, then where would they end up for the next foreseeable 2 or 3 years? I mean, that's got to be a consideration as well, especially when you're given, the success rate of applicants who actually try out for a special forces unit. So I guess the logistical piece would be probably a larger piece than we may be thinking about right now for guys that have not been exposed to it. You get a Canadian citizen who's interested in becoming a JTF2 Assaulter. We put them in a direct pipeline to provide for them and give them the most opportune success. If they're unsuccessful, then what? Then where do they go, and how do we take care of them?
Those are all interesting questions. I like it. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I think that currently Canada's solution is just being solved by Randy Turner on that first program that he ran. And here's why. I know that sounds like very melodramatic, but what we have is we have a small military that needs a specific boutique solution that can't be so systemically responsible as in the Canadian Armed Forces is responsible for it, because the Canadian Armed Forces, just by the time they figured out how to do it, the need is already, it's in the past. We need things like this now. And so I feel the best solution is what's currently happened with Randy, and that is taking people who are in the system already, who want to be more squared away, who engage of their own volition into a program that is going to pressure test them and help them better understand if they're in or out, or what they need to improve upon in order to be in or out. And so I see that middle ground of what Randy's providing right now as maybe the best situation right now for Canada, given our circumstances. And I'll tell you what, when Randy, I was going to say this 10, 15 minutes ago when you're explaining what you have been accomplishing, I wanted to say this, man, I so would have signed up for that. I so would have spent the money and jumped on a plane and headed to your location, like without even blinking an eye. That was desperately needed when I was in the system. I wanted to know, what am I getting myself into? And not just because I was scared or worried or concerned or anything like that. I wanted to know what I was getting myself into so that I could be better at what I was getting into before I showed up to the start line. I was committed for sure, always in pretty much everything I do. But with that commitment, I always appreciate some level of general understanding so that I can arrive mentally prepared for what I'm about to engage in, other than just grit and stubbornness. And so I do feel that, Randy, not to put too much of a spotlight on what you've just offered, but I think it's a real good solution for Canada right now.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. This is kind of the first one that I've done like this, where we brought a group of guys and they don't know each other. Small groups, they get to know each other a little bit. I get to know them on a personal level, even though it's only 3 days. It's 3 full days and it worked out great in this particular circumstance because the weather was absolutely terrible. So when we were on the range, it was miserable. Like, it was cold, it was wet, it was damp. And it was a good thing because I got to see true colors. I got to see what these guys were capable of when the conditions were not optimal. And with that, I was able to provide legitimate feedback, right? Like, hey man, this is what I saw. Consider this as a potential fix around, right? So just make them aware of what those shortcomings might be. Not saying that they choose to fix it or not, that's going to be the difference between success or failure, but at least it allows them to get honest feedback and say, hey man, think about this. This is what I've recognized over the last couple of days, and over to you to do something about it.
So I got another question on this, and it's quite interesting. So I remember watching the dive prelims that we used to run through the engineer house, and initially there was the dive course, so you could apply to that and you get sent on your dive course to become a combat diver. But so many people failed the dive course that they started a dive prelim. So now you had to go on the dive prelim in order to get to the dive course in order to do the diving thing. And then there were a number of failures on the dive prelim, so the unit started putting on pre-prelims, right? So like they would test the guys in the unit to make sure that they could make the prelim so that they could pass the thing, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we avoid creating the timing to a 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 timing? Like we've all been there where the sergeant major says, okay, everybody, parade's at 7:00. And then the next rank down says, okay, well, everybody be there 6:45, 6:30, 6:15, 6:00. And then you're showing up 3 hours early and you're like, okay, well, why am I even here right now?
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that in regards to the training courses and the prelims to the setups to the so on and so forth, and not go too far?
That's a good question. I think like some of the units, some of the infantry units are already doing that. They do pre-selection workups that are ran by the PSP staff. So, the strength and conditioning professionals that are working at those organizations, they'll formulate a team of like basically like a platoon of pre-selection workup. So these guys, Valcarce, they do it. Petawawa, they do it. I'm pretty sure in Gagetown they do it as well. Where there's these guys that are interested in trying out for one of these organizations in CANSOFCOM. PSP creates a structure of training like 16 weeks out or months leading up to it. I think it's a good thing because when it's guided and structured, you run less chance of injuries, overuse injuries, et cetera, but it also gives these guys a structure, a program that they can work towards. And when folks are invested in the assistance of helping others, there is a lot of resources and effort that go into the success of preparing that individual as best as they possibly could. So when they do get a chance to hit the start line, they're in the best possible position as they can, given the amount of time that they get to train. I think it's a good thing. I maybe I'm a little bit biased because, like yourself, Shaun, when I was preparing for selection, there wasn't a lot of information out there. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just trained like a savage and figured the more I beat the snot out of my body, the better that's probably going to pay off in the end. And when I look back on it, it did. Like physically, I was prepared. I was well prepared. Now, the potential negative consequence to that is years after the fact is when things start to break down on my body. Now, was that because of the way I trained leading up to selection? Was that a culmination of selection preparation plus years in on the team plus MMA fighting? Sure, there's probably accumulation, but where I'm going with that is if I had a structured mentor coach that could have, guided my progression with simple things, for example, like, I don't know, focus on some flexibility, focus on some shoulder mobility stuff. If you get that early, there is a higher probable chance that you're going to run into, less chance of bigger issues down the road. So I think it's a good thing. I think a structured program, and from what I've been witness to, what the PSP staff are doing at some of these organizations, I think is bang on.
Interesting. Dean, you got any thoughts on this from your side of the border?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good move that we've made because kind of like Randy, it was the same for me. Just, hey, I'm going to selection. I did what I could to be ready, and I really had no idea what I was doing. But today, our special forces guys who are assigned to recruiting command, once they walk in and once they meet the prerequisites, can pass the standard PT test, have the GT score, et cetera, they now belong to them, and they spend a significant amount of time prepping them for the course. So they go work out with them, they mentor them, kind of like what Randy was saying, get to know them as a person. They really focus on like hiring attitude, not skill. So we're not really concerned of the fact that you're the best, machine gun, shooter out there. We just want to see your attitude, and that's really what it comes down to. But they get all that mentorship before they actually go to selection, which I personally believe was a great move. Well, myself, I quite frankly, I didn't even know exactly I absolutely didn't know what special forces was. And then selection, I just knew it was a place where somebody told me if I was good enough or not. And then I showed up. And that was about as much information as I got on it, which was okay, but once again, always improving, always, getting better. I think that is something as special forces, we've done a great job of preparing. As far as the tier systems go, I mean, so there's a difference between what we have at SWIC, which is our special warfare, training, and then where we have at the individual unit training. So everybody can go through CIFSIG level 2, which is sniper level 2 course. And then if you do well, then you go to CIFSIG level 1 out at Fort Bragg, or excuse me, Fort Liberty now. And then same with like you go to SFOIC here as individual unit training. But then if you do really well and you have the aptitude and want to do it, then you go to SFARTIC. So I don't think there needs to be any more tiers than that. The 15 minutes to the 15 minutes to the 50, I think that's starting to get a little insane, especially resource intensive. And we just don't have the time or bandwidth, or more importantly, these days, the money to be able to do all that. So, but I do like the idea of individual unit training where every CSU group can train to what they have the standard be for, like CIFSIG level 2. Hey, you're really good at this. You have the aptitude, you have the knowledge. Now you're ready for the big boy, the major leagues, and we're going to send you out to Fort Liberty, and then you get the certificate.
Interesting. Shaun, what are your thoughts on
I like the idea of having a system whereby there's a very high standard. There's definitely pass or fail without any doubt. And whether you ever get into that system or not, it's something to aspire to. So let's say that the pass rate to become a JTF2 operator is 1% from the amount of people who initially sign on the dotted line that they want to be JTF2. So now let's call it 1%. And so that's, a rare enough number or small enough number that it's quite select. And for a guy like me, when I joined, I was interested in select. I was interested in rare. I was interested in the hard. I was interested in things that I never thought I'd be able to accomplish. I pursued what I thought was impossible. And so there has to be something in the game for a guy like us. There just has to be. And so what that does is it creates longevity in a career for someone who might bounce earlier just because there's not enough. There's not enough in the game for that particular individual, how they're wired, how their mind works, how their emotional state works, how their physicality works, what they want in life, what inspires them. And so there has to be something that is super difficult, super rare, hard to accomplish. And so whether I would have ever accomplished JTF2 is neither here nor there. What is important is that there's something to inspire me. And while I'm moving towards it and possibly failing in the process, the guy on my left and right is paying attention, and they're inspired by my inspiration. And maybe that gets them in their game where they're pursuing their impossible or their hard to achieve. And so I think that there's a doubling effect of having this kind of a rare trajectory or a rare success rate trajectory, because it inspires the rare bird who really, really wants that, but it inspires the people on either side of that rare bird to seek more for themselves. And that doesn't mean that they will become JTF2. And it doesn't even mean that they want to become JTF2. What it does mean is they want more for themselves, whatever that means.
Well, one of the things I shared with these guys is I said, there are a lot of people who talk about it, but not a lot of people that actually follow through with even attempting selection, right? A lot of talkers, not a lot of doers. And what I shared with these guys is I said, regardless of the outcome, whatever happens, you're going to learn so much about yourself. You're going to learn about, certain things that you didn't even know existed in terms of being exposed to certain things. And because of that, no one will ever be able to take that away from you. Right. So what I'm trying to share and motivate guys to do is at least try. If they have a small seed of thought or notion in the back of their head, do it. Do it now, because one day we're all going to wake up and we're going to forget where we put our keys, just like every other 70-year-old, right? And you're going to probably look back and go, Frig, I wish I did. Well, rather than wishing you did, just do it. And you're going to learn a lot about yourself. It's going to be an adventure of a lifetime and you won't regret it. So the way I look at it is, we don't know, right? Until you actually do selection, do you have the attributes that the organization is looking for? I can have a good long look at somebody, and I'm pretty good with reading personalities and understanding if they're going to be a good fit or not, but I don't have a crystal ball, man. The reality is you need to do the work, you need to put in the effort, and you need to put yourself out there and be okay with the fact that you might not be successful. That's okay. That doesn't make you less of a person. It certainly doesn't make you less of a soldier. It just means the attributes that they're looking for, you just weren't it right now. Right? But, I would highly encourage, if guys are thinking about it, and do it. Put the paperwork in, put in the effort, put the miles in and get after it. Go for it, and you won't regret it for sure.
I like that. Dean, you got any additional thoughts on this?
I would just simply add, you may surprise yourself. I don't think everybody seems to think they know what we're looking for, and you don't, and it constantly changes. And so, just while you might be out there thinking, well, this just isn't right for me, I would just challenge you and say, you don't know that, because quite frankly, we don't know that yet.
Yeah.
Everything changes and conditions change almost quarterly. We have new requirements, we have new things to get done, and we're looking for different people to fill those gaps and capabilities. And so, just like Randy said, just give it a shot. I think you'll surprise yourself.
That is
And if not, you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dean. That's brilliant advice, because things do change. The atmospherics change, the environment changes, and you're absolutely right. Things change, and different demographic, different types of character are being looked for every year. So I agree with you, man. I would echo that 100%.
Absolutely. Now, Shaun, what
I'll
do
tell
you
you
got?
one thing that doesn't change, though, and this is guaranteed, and this will never change, by the way, a high standard. So the nuance of the calibration might shift, the directional might shift, but the standard is always the highest standard possible. And so it's less about showing up on the start line and understanding how to do cyber warfare since the time you were 6 years old. And it's more about showing up on the start line and then understanding that you're about to face a standard that you've never faced before. And you get to process that in real time as you don't meet the expectations, perhaps. And so the high standard that you'll get exposed to that perhaps you've never seen before is maybe one of the best lessons that you'll ever learn in your life. Yeah. The second most important lesson perhaps you'll learn from standing on that start line, whether you last half a day, whether you last the full extension of selection, whether you make it to the teams or not, something that you'll learn along the way, the moment that you put your foot across the start line, is you'll get exposed to freaks that you've never seen before. You get to see the freak show. And now you're not imagining it. Now you get to see it in 3D. The idea that you had in your head of, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be surrounded by Captain Americas. Well, I'm 5'9". I'm no Captain America. And so, but there's guys like me, there's guys like Randy, there's guys like Dean who will lean against a wall and eyeball you, and they might not look like a big deal, but they are. Not just a big deal in Hollywood, not just a big deal at the Tim Hortons. They're a big deal in the world that they operate in, where they're highly competent, highly skilled, and comfortable leaning against the wall, not looking like Captain America. So what you get to do when you show up on day one, the start line, is you get to see the freak show. It removes the imagination out of it. Now you're not imagining that everyone looks like this and does that. Now you get to really taste it. Now you get to be surrounded by it. And that's maybe the biggest privilege you'll ever get in your life, is stepping across the start line and being surrounded by the freak show. Every minute that you're in the freak show you get to understand this super important point. You're capable of more because you get to see it all around you. As you stand there thinking, well, that's impossible, but it's happening right in front of my nose. How is he doing that? How are they doing that? How is this being done up till now? I've never been able to articulate. I don't think anyone will ever be able to articulate the impact that occurs when you step into a new environment called the freak show. It's hard to write it. It's hard to show it on TV. It's hard to verbally explain it to someone. You got to be in it to understand it. You've got to be leaning against it to understand that there's a different level of performance, a different level of thinking, a different level of different. It's something that you've got to be in. And once you're in it, it's like the best Christmas present ever. And here's why. Because the moment that you unwrap that freak show idea, the rest of your life, anything is now possible. From the day that I got badged, I've never stopped thinking, I can do anything. Because that's what they built. They built me into a guy who believes I can do anything I want, as long as I put my mind to it, and as long as I put the work in, and as long as I stay focused and I have the right conviction, the right righteousness to the thing. The moment that I put my eyes on something, I consider it done. And that's because that's what I learned in the teams. But before the teams, I didn't think that way. And so there is a mindset gift that you get the moment that you cross that start line and observe the freak show.
Interesting. I have so many questions, but I'm gonna limit myself to one here, and that is the applying this to everyday life, right? For those that are not special operators, for those that are just looking to better themselves in some way or trying to try to move forward with their life. They don't like what they're doing now. They're trying to do something different. Is that, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is the fact of, I would say it's very similar to, learning how to run and then looking at like ultra marathoners and going, oh, well, I could never do that. But there's a process to it, right? There's a development of trying certain things and then actually doing it, not just saying, oh, well, I guess I'll never be able to run that 120K thing, so I'm just not going to run at all. And I'm wondering, what are you guys' thoughts in terms of applying this mentality, this concept of selection and putting your foot across the start line to the average everyday person that has never experienced this before? They've never gone to selection. Maybe they've never been in the military. How do we apply it? How do we take this mindset to the people? Dean, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I would say it really starts with discipline for sure. I'm not a really big fan of the victim's mindset, so I get a little bit heated when I hear people be like, "I can't do it," and it bore me, and I just don't understand that type of mentality. And maybe that's just because of the way that I was brought up, and in my career in military. But I'm pretty confident. And there's obviously anomalies out there, but if you're truly determined to be great at something, you have every opportunity to do it. The only thing that is going to stop you is going to be yourself. And that may sound a little bit arrogant to say, but I don't care. Like, if you want to become an ultra marathon runner and you are 50 pounds overweight, I guarantee you start today. Next year, you will be completely shocked on how far you've come, and you will become an ultra marathon runner if you want to. But will you be bringing home the gold, in the Olympics? Maybe, maybe not. But I guarantee you absolutely will not if you don't have the discipline or care and the motivation to get started. And that's where it becomes. And that's where, I always say all the time that special operators, we're at the end of the day, we're all cut from the same cloth. I can't walk down the street here in Colorado with walking past somebody and I look at him and he looks at me and I look back and I don't know him, but I know him. So it's a really kind of weird dynamic that we have. But once again, I just got to go back to that victim's mentality. And I think that's, Chance, was where you're kind of touching on. I just can't stand that stuff. Like you need to surround yourself with people who are motivated and like kind of what Shaun was talking about with the freak show. That was what was absolutely amazing for me is for once, I'm no athletic stud, but when I was in the 509th back in the day, I was a pretty decent runner. I was a pretty good athlete. There wasn't too many people who would outrun me. And I took that personally if they did, because I took my athleticism to, I held that to a high standard. But then, I got the selection and I got humbled real quick on like, oh, okay, I'm here with the people who care. The everyone here right now, honestly, I don't even think I placed very well. And I was a good runner. And so that allowed me to take my game up. And I just had no idea how far you could actually reach and how deep you could dive into a subject if you were that, wanting and that heart you wanted to put into it. So I guess what I would tell people is, I get it if you don't want to join special forces and special operations, it's not for you. However, you can apply that same mindset to anything, whether it's learning computer skills, you want to become an engineer, the whole idea of, well, I just can't do it. I just personally, I won't ever understand that logic. I would say get yourself some new friends who are motivated, and then have discipline, because that's really what it comes down to. Motivation, that kind of comes and goes, but the discipline is the reason why you show up every single day. And if you work on that, you can accomplish whatever the hell you want in life.
Love it. Randy, what are you thinking?
100%, man. The consistency and the can-do attitude. Like when you're exposed, we'll use selection for example. You're exposed to 30 guys on that particular serial. You look around, and that's 29 other studs that are very capable. But what you'll notice is all the guys in special forces, man, they're just regular dudes. They're regular dudes. They make mistakes just like everybody else. They slip sometimes when they meant to jump, and just like everybody else, they slip along the way and make mistakes. What's different though is the can-do attitude. I think why there are certain guys that are cut from a specific cloth that are drawn to special forces because of that higher purpose, that striving for excellence, that can-do attitude, where there's an obstacle in the way, they'll figure out a way through it, around it, under it. They'll move it out of the way, and that type of attitude could be applied to, like you guys just said, any walk of life. If you want to do a thing, sure, there's a process. Yeah, we got to put in work. There's no easy button. If there was an easy button, everybody would be hitting it. But that can-do attitude, whatever the obstacle is, just know that there is a way around it, through it, under it. But it is discipline, consistency, and mindset.
Absolutely. Shaun, where are you coming from this?
I think that's all very true. I think we're all saying the same thing for sure. I think where it falls apart a little bit, to your question specifically, Chance, where you said, for other people who can't get involved in the freak show, or perhaps as civilians aren't exposed to this kind of, we'll call it excellence. I think that one of the issues that makes that difficult for the general population is, unlike special operators, you will show up on the start line and you're not just performing for yourself. You're performing for a team. Even if you don't know those 29 other guys that are standing on the start line next to you, and the 30 that are starting on day one, you still know that they're on your team. You still know that they're all oriented in the same direction. You still know that they've got a higher purpose, and that is for the unit, for the large organization, for the team. But that isn't the case always out in the general population, where someone will have an idea that they want to pursue excellence in a particular thing. But if it's just for them, then they can falter in that moment. When things start to get a little bit difficult, half a year, 3/4 of a year into whatever it is that they're into, they can shrug their shoulders and say, I'm going to take a day off, that turns into a week off, that turns into a month off, because they don't have enough personal conviction to see it through. But you can add an extra layer to that. You can add team conviction to that. No matter who you are, you don't ever have to serve in the military or any organization. You can be a solo player to some degree. You've just got to add a layer of team conviction to it. And that might be for your neighbor. or for the person who always checks out your library books, who's always really friendly to you, or your family, or etc. So I think that in the general population, one of the failings on staying in the game is not prioritizing the team aspect.
This is an interesting point. So my wife just finished a half marathon yesterday, and her friends were doing the run, and the whole time beforehand and kind of afterwards, they were just constantly like, "Oh, I freaking hate you! Why do you make me do this? This is ridiculous!" But they all ran it, and they all ran it for each other, right? It was one of those things that, as you're saying, Shaun, they held each other accountable through those moments. But it's kind of hilarious that you bring it up because they really did not. None of them wanted to do it on their own, and yet they all completed it together, even though they ran at separate times. But I think that's a great point in the fact of if you're the freak show could be the CrossFit gym that's down the street, right? That are in better shape than you are in the moment, right? That freak show could be anything. It doesn't need to be the 30 dudes that are showing up on selection that are freaks, right? You show up at a jiu-jitsu gym, you're going to have all ranges of freaks in there. And that's what we are. So it makes sense.
I look at it like a tribe, right? So I believe in tribalism. If you think about, the American Army, the Canadian Armed Forces, it's a tribe, and within the tribe there are sub tribes, right? Whether that's Special Forces, Air Force, Navy, Army, you name it, there's sub tribes, and then with that there's sub tribes still. And when we invite people into our tribe, sometimes think of it like two glasses of water. So one of my tribes mate, one of me, we've got half glass water. Every now and again, I need to fill up a tribe mate's glass, right? I need to fill them up with something, either a kick in the butt, a physical challenge, an emotional attaboy, something of that nature. And every now and again, I may need my cup filled. And when you're part of the tribe, you're constantly giving and taking. But if you're part of a tribe where you're always giving, at some point you're going to have nothing left to give, right? So when we invite people into our tribe, I truly believe when we look at the Canadian Armed Forces and then we look at special forces, and then within each special forces, you have tribes of like-minded individuals that will push each other, challenge each other, keep each other accountable. And that, in an essence on itself, is what creates a healthy team where there's always, or not always, excuse me, there's sometimes a little bit of give, sometimes there's a little bit of take. Some people that will fall victim to, feeling like a victim, for example, is, what's in it for me and how easy can I get it, right? As opposed to putting in an effort, giving a little and receiving a little along the journey to achieve that ultimate outcome, whatever that might be. So with that being said, I believe, when we endeavor to achieve really good things, we're going to need help along the way. And the sooner we wrap our head around the fact, the better off we're going to be. So every now and again, it's okay to be humble enough to ask for help. It's okay to be humble enough to look for a mentor. And it's okay to be told something that you probably don't like hearing, because that thing that you don't like hearing is probably exactly what you need to hear.
I like that. Dean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add is just, quit giving a shit or quit caring about what other people think.
Yeah.
That was a big lesson learned for me because I was definitely victim of that. I didn't want to try some things because I was afraid I'd fail, and then I'd be like, man, people are going to think I'm horrible at this. And that just absolutely crushed me when I was younger and stupid. But as I got older, a little more mature, I put that aside and I was like, you know what? Every time I fail, I'll come back. I'll do it again. And then I got pretty decent at most of the things I wanted to become good at. So yeah, I would just simply add, quit caring what other people think, except for those that you love most. Definitely their opinions matter, but for the most part, who cares? Get in there, give it your best shot of what you got. Come back the next day, try it again, and then make it happen.
Absolutely. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and just reading between the lines on what Dean just said, I don't want anyone out there to misunderstand that Dean doesn't care. Of course, Dean cares, but he cares
Yeah,
in
I
a
do.
particular way. And he's probably not out there running around trying to intentionally fail and demonstrate the worst way to do things. He's probably out there trying to do his best and demonstrating sometimes he wins and sometimes he fails. But when he fails, he re-engages and wins. And so Dean does care. It's just that he's figured out a way, just like I have, because I'm the same way, Dean, and I'm sure Randy is as well. We engage wholeheartedly. Sometimes it goes our way, sometimes it doesn't. But if it doesn't go our way, we re-engage until we get the outcome that is either expected of us or the one that we demand of ourselves. Because again, the part of relentless pursuit of excellence is not like getting halfway into something and then just shrugging our shoulders and thinking, well, that beat me again today. Negative. I'm going to beat it today. And so you have to have a certain, maybe not fiery competitiveness, but you have to have a certain amount of competitiveness with yourself. Like I'm always competing against Shaun. And so beyond competing with Shaun, I do compete with others, but I try to keep it healthy because they keep me honest. Like their standards higher than my standards, or their performances better than my performances. And I know that maybe it's not en vogue right now to compare. It's, dude, don't compare. Don't be all Mr. Comparison. But I do. I compare my results against other results because that's what keeps me striving. If I thought I had everything figured out because my worldview was about this big, then I could kick back and watch Netflix and eat Doritos for the rest of my life. But by following the right people, by seeking people that are perhaps not mentors, but they unknowingly act as mentors for me, it keeps me full tilt engaged in life, expecting more of myself. So if I'm really competitive with me, but I've got nothing to strive for because I don't think there's anything bigger, better, faster than what I'm accomplishing right now, it's only because my worldview is that big. So it's our responsibility to go out and seek more excellence than we believe is possible in this moment in order to keep ourselves honest.
100%. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But Randy, I know you got to take off real quick here. So you got any final thoughts on anything we've covered so far before we let you go?
Great conversation. Nice to meet you, Dean. Hopefully we can connect again. Shaun and Chance, always good chatting with you guys. I would leave the viewers with this last thought. I truly believe, like, sometimes with a hammer, sometimes with a nail. I believe that the success that I've been so fortunate to achieve in this lifetime is because I spent a lot more time being the nail than I have being the hammer. So a lot more lessons learned getting smashed versus being the victor.
I like that a lot. Well, Randy, we'll let you run off. You can get to your next call. I know you got a jet here real quick, and then we'll carry on with the convo. But appreciate you being here, man. It's fantastic.
Good seeing you, buddy.
Always love chatting with you.
Nice. Take care.
Yeah, even if you are a bent nail.
Bent nail, I like it. We'll see you, Randy.
All right, boys. Take care.
So the question I have on this is understanding who to compare yourself with. I really like the fact that you brought this up, Shaun, and the fact of like knowing who, the fact that you actually compare yourself to other people, which is great. But you have to know who to compare yourself to, because if I were to compare myself, basic understanding of astrophysics, and I'm like, well, I want to be like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Well, I can be like him eventually, but I can't compare myself to him right now, right? I can compare myself to the people that are in my circle that are of the same skill set, knowledge set, whatever, right? So I wanted to touch on this and get your guys' to maybe clarify it a little bit in terms of, yes, compete with yourself, but compare yourself to your own circle rather than everybody out there, if that makes any sense. Dean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say, it really, once again, starts with that good mentor. That's who I found myself, consistently comparing myself against as one of my first mentors. Everything he did was light years beyond of what I ever dreamed of accomplishing. But I didn't let it, push me back. I was just like, all right, he runs faster than I do. And I was like, all right, that's cool. But then he outshot me too at the range. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then he knew more than I did by a lot. So I was like, okay, that's cool. But I still compared myself against him every single day. And quite frankly, there was one time, and I'll never forget it, that I outshot him at the range for the first time. And I was just like, Now, granted, I never outshot him again, but I did it once, and I was so excited about that. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's not probably fair to compare myself against Michael Jordan if I want to, if I want to crush basketball and I'm just getting started. But you probably have a few friends out there, mentors that you can start with, and then continue to climb the ladder for sure.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Do you know, my thoughts are this, that I do like, I'm not much of a basketball player. I played it in high school. And again, I'm short, so you can imagine that I wasn't a superstar under the net. So, but I did, even back in the late 70s, I was paying attention to who's who in the zoo in whatever I engaged in. And so, being not a great basketball player, I do remember when the Harlem Globetrotters demonstration team, their road team, came to our tiny little town in the Rockies of Alberta. Our little town was 3,500 people. And I was watching the freaking Harlem Globetrotters run circles around our high school teachers who were the opposing team. Now, can you imagine a bunch of pasty, kind of overweight teachers competing against the Harlem Globetrotters? I remember sitting in the bleachers and watching this, and it was like the wildest thing because I'd never, ever, ever seen anything quite like it. It was the first time that I got to see up close. I'd seen professional soccer teams when I was living in England, but it was the closest I'd ever been to what I would still consider a professional athlete. These guys were so good, and I hadn't imagined that humans could do what they were doing on that court until I saw it with my own Mark 1 eyeballs up close. And so I think that's a great opportunity, and it's a great sort of foundational moment for me where I understood that, oh, there's levels to the game, man. And I've carried that thought with me forever since that time. Levels to the game. And I mean, Dean, in your world, you fully understand that there are levels to the game, and there's levels that you never know exist until you're exposed to them. I mean, you can imagine levels beyond the levels that you understand, but they're kind of, is it, isn't it? Is that real? Is it not real? But when you get to see it, and I'm not talking about in a video, I'm talking about in front of your nose, up close in the 3D world, it's a game changer if you're the right person. If you're not the right person, if you're observing the Harlem Globetrotter moment, you might just shrug your shoulders and think, oh, that was fun. What's next? But for me, what I thought was, oh man, look at these guys go. There's levels to this game. And so that's a fundamental moment for me. It should be a fundamental moment for everyone that they get to experience in 3D such a level of excellence that they didn't know exist. That should encourage people to engage in the process just a little bit more, I think. What do you think, Dean?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's just, I remember being at a fitness competition and I felt like I was strong. And once, what to your point, it's all about that. How do you approach the situation? And I watched this guy, back squat an ungodly amount, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do it, So, granted, I'm still working to get there, but my mindset walking into it was just not like, oh, that was cool. I was just like, oh, okay, there's people who can do that. I wonder if I can do it, and then I just started working there, and so I'm getting closer every day. I mean, he was a really good athlete. I don't know if I'll ever make it there, but I'm going to give it one hell of a shot for sure.
Dude, you're going to do it.
You'll get there.
At least
You'll
try.
get there. Yeah. This brings us up to SHOT Show actually, and I wanted to bring this back into it, the conversation, because there are a lot of people that would look at you, Dean, and look at you, Shaun, and say, oh man, I want to be like that guy, but then compare themselves, what you're doing right now, to what they're doing right now. And I think that is a big difference. To your point, Dean, you said that guy was back squatting an ungodly amount of weight. Awesome. But the fact that you can't do that right now doesn't make you less of a person. And I think that for a lot of people out there, that's where that comparison lies, is, am I of equal standing as this person? I can't do what they can do. I guess I'm not as good of a person as they are, right? So it has a lot to do with your own self-worth when you're looking at that. And for you two guys who have have quite a bit of self-worth, you understand who you are, where you come from, all of the background work that you've done. The average person who doesn't have that, when they compare themselves to other people, uh, it is a direct worth comparison versus a technical skill comparison, if that makes any sense. And so I'm wondering, when you were at SHOT Show, you were out there wandering around there. Did you have any of those kind of comparisons with some of the people that you were talking to, some of the awesome, wicked people that are wandering around SHOT Show?
Yeah, I mean, one was really obvious, and that was standing next to Royce Gracie, which, I like MMA, and I like I've been doing NAGA since I was a kid, the National Grappling Association, so not that I've ever been anything to write home about, but I like to be on the mat, I like to try my best, but standing next to somebody like him, and he's at what, 60 something years old, and then quickly understanding that he could probably whip me still today, was absolutely amazing. And kind of to meet him, we spent the majority of his son is currently, he's about to go to Ranger School, so we spent a lot of time talking to him about him going to Ranger School. I think he's going to 375 Ranger Bat. I can't remember exactly, but so that was a very enlightening thing, especially to meet somebody who is not only an MMA fighter, but arguably one of the best ones who has ever existed in the world. So that was very humbling to be standing next to him and just realize the amount of wealth that is in his head was probably astonishing, and really hard for even me to compute on like how much he knows about that sport. Does that answer your question, Chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I wanted to hit on this a little bit, Shaun. You wanted to ask specifically about what he was doing at SHOT Show. So you want to re-ask your question? That way we can.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, shout out to Royce Gracie. I mean, come on. And I think it's interesting what you said, Dean, because I would have been in your shoes as well, standing next to him. And I know that for sure because I've only ever met one member of the Gracie family, and that's Huron. And he was running a seminar in Vancouver. I don't even know if I had a stripe on my white belt at the time, but I attended a seminar where he was teaching, and my BJJ coach at the time, I traveled to Vancouver with him. And so what Huron did do was he rolled with my coach. And of course, my coach could whip my arse. And then what my coach said after the fact, after he tapped to just side pressure, my coach said, I've never tapped to side pressure before, but I tapped to that. And I thought, I didn't see that in the moment. I couldn't feel the pressure that was being placed on him at that time. But I believe my coach when he says that he's never felt anything like that. So again, it was another case of levels to the game. And I think that, I want to be careful and be very clear in what I say next, that if you're kind of in the game, let's say you're in the military, and let's say you've been in the infantry for 5, 6, 7 years, you understand that there's levels to the game, of course, but that doesn't mean that your level sucks. It just means that there's levels to the game. Just like when I showed up to that seminar with Huron, I was a no striper. I was a nobody, but that didn't diminish the 32 years of martial arts that I'd done prior to that. And it didn't diminish the fact that I'd had several careers of ass kickery. It just meant that I wasn't that great at BJJ at that point. So I was a confident dude who knew some things. I just didn't know a lot of BJJ. And to me, that moment, hanging out with him, shaking his hand, getting a photo, I've got the photo somewhere. It was a big deal to me, even though I'd already done a bunch of big deal stuff, I suppose, if I can use that term loosely. That moment, he was the big deal and I was the nobody. And so I don't want anyone to get it conflated or misinterpreted, that just because you're a big deal in a thing doesn't mean you're a big deal in everything. And just because you're a newbie in something doesn't mean you're a newbie in everything. So anytime that you're stepping into a new thing, don't diminish yourself to a degree where you think you're worthless in it. You're bringing value everywhere you go. You're bringing something to the table, even if it's only your first day in whatever it is that you're stepping into.
100%. But that wasn't the question you were going to ask, Dean. So what was the question you were going to ask?
Sorry, yeah. So my question to you, Dean, is I saw the photos of you meeting all of these various guys. And as I looked at the photos, I thought, I wonder if Dean's opinion is getting changed in any way during this small event. I wonder if it's recalibrating some of his ideas. I wonder if he sees the future differently now. That was my consideration.
There you go. What are you thinking?
That's a good question. I would say definitely my opinion was molded because I like the idea of always taking input, and not just simply dismissing it because, this was, so I owe a case of beer. That was my first ever SHOT Show, and it was completely overwhelming for me. I was completely astonished on how many vendors and everything there was, the amount of people who were there, the expertise in about every single subject you can imagine was setting in there. Once again, from Royce Gracie, you name it. There's just so many people there. But, obviously the reason for me being there is because I work for the nonprofit, the Special Forces Foundation, and I'm extremely passionate about, giving back and helping my community. And I can't do that without a network and having people understand, one, what Green Berets do, and more importantly, after we're done doing it, the help and some of the things that are required to ensure that they live good lives. We unfortunately, our once we retire, it kind of hits you like a train, or so I've been told. You start to kind of fall apart. Your knees don't work as well. You can't sneak up on anybody anymore. They can hear you walking a mile down the road, basically shoot you in the dark at this point because you're so loud with your breathing and your knees cracking. Your mental, which I joke about, but you can find yourself in a really dark place because you've been surrounded by this cohort of these high performers for your entire life, and then you suddenly find yourself somewhat alone. Not alone in the aspect of without family, but without the brotherhood or whatever you want to call it. You find yourself, you're not being called to go to the local bar with your, the team anymore, to have a team party or anything like that. Those kind of start to move away. And so I really wanted to give back. And so the SHOT Show allows me to meet a lot of very like-minded people. And so to your point, Shaun, does it change my opinion? I would honestly say the SHOT Show was probably the wrong place to be because there were so many people who thought along the same exact lines as I do. So I don't know if that's surprising or not. I didn't find it surprising. Every single person, I was like, you like guns? I like guns. Imagine that. So it wasn't really shocking from that point of view. But the feedback I got on nonprofits and especially on mental health, because I don't know. I mean, this shouldn't be news to anybody, but we're not doing well. After 20 years of GWAT, I don't think we're making, and I use this comparison very loosely because Vietnam was a completely different, war and what happened there. But to some degree, after the war was over, it seems to me is very easy to forget the people who were involved with it for 20 years who are now all retiring. What I call the GWAT babies, the Global War on Terrorism babies. And so we're all retiring, because I pretty much started at the beginning of the war, and now I'm coming up on retirement, and all my peers and colleagues are all coming up on retirement, except for the ones who want to do 30 years. So we have to do better, in my humble opinion, of taking care of them. But you can't do it alone. Kind of the Chance's point earlier, he was talking about, collective tissue and working together. And excuse me, it was Randy who was talking about, you take some, you give some. And that's where we're at. So talking to some of these organizations, like Black Rifle Coffee Company, we spoke to them. I talked to Born Primitive, a few other Gators, eyewear, talk to them, a lot of like-minded people who understand what we've been through, not just collectively within special forces, but as a military as a whole. and hey, how can we continue to help give back to them? And in such, I'm all about a mutually respective, a relationship. So, and how do I give back to you and your corporation? Because being an entrepreneur is not no easy business. So how can we help you help us and building that network? So yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint, Shaun. Nobody really, that may be on me. I don't think I met too many people who had a different kind of philosophy or mindset than I did. We were all pretty much, the same kind of type of people.
I like it. Shaun, you got any additional thoughts to that?
Well, I'm glad that it kind of shaped up that way, because that was probably encouraging to you. I mean, I don't know how far you are into your journey of involved with the foundation and how established you feel. Like, do you feel you're 100% good to go? You know everything that you need to know. You feel fully supported in your, or do you have a little sort of, I wonder if I'm doing well at this job, or I wonder if there's I mean, do you have those sort of itchy kind of feelings that scratch at the back of your brain? Because I do in everything that I do. Whatever I do, I've got that little itch in my back that says, am I dropping the ball somewhere? Is there something that I'm gonna ... I plan for the worst, hope for the best. And so an event like that would be like good for me, a guy like me, because it's not that I need everyone to echo chamber all of my thoughts. What I need to feel is that I'm properly calibrated, I'm properly aligned, that it's not just Shaun in Shaun's world that has just Shaun thoughts. I like to be surrounded by like-minded people on occasion so that I can feel like I'm heading in the right direction. And then I like to step out of that organization or step out of that SHOT Show and then keep on doing Shaun, feeling a little more calibrated. So that's kind of what a SHOT Show event is for me, is I step in, check my calibration, and then step out and do my thing, feeling almost like not reinvigorated, but feeling like, okay, this is good. I'm heading in the right direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, kind of like a compass check.
Yeah, compass
You know,
check.
it's always really easy just to think you're doing everything correctly, but it's always really nice to have that, that mentor or that person on your side that kind of just looks over your shoulder and he's just like, oh, that looks good to me too. Like, okay, cool. And then at least if I'm going in the wrong direction, we're both wrong now. So, power numbers. But yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, like meeting, I tell, I told this to a couple friends. I read it from a buddy, and it's like, if you think being a Green Beret is hard, try being an entrepreneur. And it is. It's extremely difficult. And at the end of the day, a nonprofit organization such as ours is a business. We have to bring in revenue and help customers. I use those terms loosely, but it is a business. And at the SHOT Show, there was a lot of very successful business leaders, and being able to see how they interact with people, like how people interact with them, questions they take, and I just didn't have enough time to kind of build that close relationship. But I'm as a new person. So full disclosure, Ignacio Garza is the current executive director, and in the next 6 months or so, I'm going to replace him as the executive director of the Special Forces Foundation. So once again, I got that good mentor that's been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, that really has learned, a lot of and made the mistakes that he's trying to pass along to me to say, hey, don't make these same mistakes so we can take this organization to another level and then help more people. So I do have that great mentorship, but at the same time, some of my thought process is different than his, for sure. And so, but I want to get those opinions and those ideas from other successful business leaders like at the SHOT Show, and kind of build those relationships so I can call on the phone. Like Bruno Fallon from Born Primitive comes to mind. Meeting this guy, you could just tell that he was the real deal. He was super articulate, smart, knew what he was accomplishing. I was just like, okay, that's a business leader right there. That's the level I need to get to if I'm going to run this organization correctly. And so just meeting and being able to build and start to build relationships with these people is like, I can't wait to go next year and meet more people, because it was just so amazing to kind of take all that in And quite frankly, the only thing that really sucked about it is the fact that I couldn't take notes fast enough. It was just drinking from a fire hose the entire time. And you know how it is, just being like, that's a great point. And then I wrote that down, but then I missed the next point. So next time, maybe I need to take a couple people with me who can explain some of the big words that are being used from time to time, and then I can research them, get a little bit smarter. But I'm just taking it one day at a time. Luckily, I have a great team. And so at the end of the day, I think if I'm surrounded by a great team and people who care, we'll get there and we'll be just fine.
Yeah. You got to go old school with the Johnny Mnemonic link up in the back of your head, just record everything, you'll be set. But
yeah, that's not a bad idea. Maybe next year I'll bring a microphone with me.
Neuralink it and you'll be set. You'll have everything
Yeah.
you need. The interesting part about this is that the power of the network. And I think this is such a key point to bring up in terms of, a lot of times we like to surround ourselves with like-minded individuals, right? We like to hang out with people that think the same way as us. But to Shaun's point, to be able to step out of that realm, to be able to step out of that circle and really kind of look at it, we kind of touched on it earlier in terms of selection. And, if you're surrounded by not great people, well, they're not going to be doing a whole lot, right? But if you surround yourself by people that you can look up to and try to keep up with, that's a good thing too. Or that is a good thing. But do you think that there's a point where you can fall into that echo chamber trapped, or the echo chamber trap? Man, I can't talk today. Where you will really struggle to kind of step out of that realm, because I see a lot of vets that they're stuck in that echo chamber of, well, I'm surrounded by other veterans and everybody kind of hates life and nobody strives to be anything better or anything more or anything beyond that. They just fall into that echo chamber and, hey man, we're going to talk about the same things for the next 15 years. It's not, how do we break that cycle? Let's put it that way. Dean, coming back to you. What do you think?
Oh man, that's $1 million question for sure. I tell people all the time who are transitioning, retire, I was like, don't let being a Green Beret define who you are. Is it a big deal? Sure. I mean, it is, it's a great success to have in your life. But if you think that being 40, 45, 50 years old and you're calling your career done and you're just like, yeah, I was a Green Beret, and you're now talking about that 15 years after retirement, personally, I think you're doing it wrong. Should you be proud and appreciative of it? Absolutely. But take that next step and redefine yourself and challenge yourself to take on, new endeavors, whether that is to be an entrepreneur, get your MBA, I don't know, move into engineering, whatever your passion is, but don't simply let one big characteristic in your life define you for the rest of it, if that makes sense. And to your point, Chance, that's really, it's a lot easier said than done. It's easy for me to say it, and I've challenged, I struggle with it at times as I find myself, kind of talking about the same things, not challenging myself to do different things because I'm comfortable. I like what I do right now. I can't complain. I've been pretty successful with life, and I'm content for sure. But honestly, that bothers me at night at the same time. I don't like the idea of just sitting here and being comfortable with I've accomplished at life and I'm almost 40. Like, to me, I have a lot of life to live, and I'm not going to let just being a Green Beret in my military career dictate what that is for the rest of my life. I want to change it. I want to take on, and I want to definitely fail at new endeavors. And if I like it, cool. If I don't, then I'm going to move on. And I'm going to find something else to do that I enjoy doing. But don't get stuck in that endless cycle of going down to the VFW, telling the good old war stories, every single day. Get out there, challenge yourself, and find something new to do.
100%. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that is one of society's great struggles right now for veterans, is the siloized echo chamber. And so in a singular silo called veterans, they will talk about things that are relevant to that silo. There'll be very little conversation about subjects outside of that silo. And that's why I think you have to be a multi-silo person. You have to Dean's point, you've got to have a growth mindset, which he has as he absorbs his new role. And that was taught to Dean over many, many years, just like every other Green Beret is taught a growth mindset, how to improvise, adapt, and overcome, how to jump into a location and solve the unsolvable. So if you can do that within your career, you can do that within all aspects of your life. It really just comes down to why? Why even bother? Why invest in a new silo? Coffee. If that's a new silo, why bother? Acrobatics. Pick some random subject that you've never been interested in. Now you've got a new silo. And so the moment that you step into day one of new silo, you're learning new things about new people, and you have new conversations to then inject into your veteran silo. If there hasn't been a new conversation in your veteran silo about a new subject today, it's because you haven't brought in the new subject. You can't lay the blame at anyone else's feet. You can't complain about how everyone always talks about the same thing day after day after day. Bring in a new conversation. Bring in a new topic called, I just started BJJ, or I just bought a new coffee grinder, or I was at my daughter's acrobatic class and it looked like so much fun. I signed up for the adult program, did it that night, and you wouldn't believe how much fun I had. You wouldn't believe what I learned. I also learned I don't stretch enough. And so it can branch off so many conversations by bringing in a new silo into a pre-existing silo. Now, how I feel my life is run, how I have a little bit of success when I'm interacting with someone, is because I've been involved in so many silos throughout my life that I can sit on a bus bench, a park bench. I can lean against a wall in a shopping mall, and the first person who walks up to me, I can talk to them about something because I probably know something about whatever it is that they're interested in, because I've probably been interested in it at one point in my life over the last 60 years, that at least I can get as a couple of paragraphs into the topic. And then from there, I'm golden. It's about engaging with the person and making them feel like you have a sense of understanding and you value their knowledge. Now it's a two-way highway. Now it's a win-win. Now I'm learning from them and they're learning from me in whatever capacity. But we're sharing a moment rather than bored and waiting for the moment to end. And so within the veteran silos, I think that it's imperative that if new conversations aren't bubbling up on the regular, it's your job to bring in the new conversation.
That is a fantastic point, and I I could not agree more in the fact of it actually helps the larger group as well. It's not just about yourself and like, hey, I get to learn something new, and I'm going to go expand my own horizons, and then I'm going to talk to people who obviously have never engaged in it before, because I know that if I had gone into, say, my unit bay and started talking about the mysteries of the universe and trying to develop a better mindset for later on, most of the guys down there would have been like, just blank stares. I have no idea what you're talking about. Go talk to somebody else somewhere else. But that benefits the group because there's going to be somebody in there that goes, "Oh, interesting. I'd never thought about that before. Maybe I should go look it up." Or you'll realize that your group is no longer trying to advance, and maybe it's time for you to find a new group of people to talk to. So I think it's a win-win regardless of how it happens or regardless of the outcome of it. By bringing information to the group, you can still learn things from any result out of that, bringing that information in. And
Yeah, you can. You can influence a group for sure. Anyone can, unless you're freaking Gomer Pyle. And so that's really important, man. It's the right guy at the right time saying the right thing. And if those three things aren't occurring simultaneously, the uptake on the delivery is way less, if at all, any. So if Gomer Pyle slumps his way in with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth and his boots untied, and he starts briefing everyone on his new hobby that he just took up last night called macrame, it will get zero traction. So the right guy at the right time saying the right thing. So how do all of those three conditions occur simultaneously? The right guy. That probably means, and I'm loosely categorizing it as, that guy has probably done a few things. And as he steps into that bay, everyone who's in that bay probably knows that he's done a few things, not because he briefs them at the end of the day, but because they've seen it every day. They've seen his results, deeds, not words. They've seen his actions. His actions produce results. He's respected because what he says is what he does, and what he does creates results. That's the right guy. The right time is when you step in there and observe the room and read the crowd, which is a skill unto itself. You can't burst in as Gomer Pyle and just start spouting as everyone is deeply into a conversation about how to fight out of an ambush. You just can't talk about macrame at that point. Nor can you burst in as everyone's talking about macrame and tell everyone how just before you went to sleep last night, you imagined a new way to fight out of an ambush. It's a really great idea. Let me brief you on it. No one's paying attention to that if you're not the right guy and you haven't read the room. So, right guy at the right time saying the right thing. What is the right thing? Well, that really depends on who you are and what the room looks like. And I know this to be true from my life. I've said the wrong thing a bunch of times. And that's how you learn how to say the right things more often, because you fail in the moment. If you've ever been in a position of leadership and you're not the right guy and you've stepped in at the wrong time and you're going to say the wrong thing, that is called a life lesson that you'll never forget. And it needs life lessons to refine how to do this better. So, Chance, to your point, I think right guy at the right time saying the right thing is overlooked as to its importance. And I wish everyone would consider out there who they are, what they have to say, and when's the right time to say it. Because on the social media world, where a lot of people get their timings when they're going to deliver their wisdom, it's a 24/7. You can say it anytime you want, and you're saying it to a crowd that you don't probably understand, and you might not be the right guy to be typing on that keyboard. So social media, you can almost get away with a lot of things. But when you're in a three-dimensional space, when you can reach out and touch someone on the shoulder, my three rules are right guy, right time, saying the right thing.
I like it. Dean, thoughts?
I mean, I would add that, so I used to teach a course and I'd always start it off with, I'd be like, hey, everybody introduce yourself and tell me 3 hobbies that you have, but they can't include shooting, lifting, or anything to do with outdoors. Like as such as camping or fishing or something along that lines, hunting. And you would just watch them all start to wiggle in their chairs. And I would challenge them all, like by the end of the course, pick up a new hobby, at the Shaun's point, a new silo, expand your horizon a bit, because it allows you to become a little more approachable. You can build networks with people when you can talk about more than 3 subjects. And so kind of just to complement what Shaun was saying is it's just huge for you to kind of broaden your horizon on that. But at the same time, when you do learn them, I mean, I love listening to Shaun speak. I wish I could write some of this down. I got to rewatch it later on. But man, those 3 rules, I'm going to throw that into my next class too. I was like, hey, you get up here, hit those 3 topics and make sure you're on point. It's absolutely amazing. But no, yeah, that's a chance. Just once again, kind of bring it back full circle is, don't limit yourself to that 1 or 2 silos, expand it, take up some new hobby and get after it. And I think that'll allow you in so many ways that you probably don't even understand how it's going to help you yet. You're going to, one day you're going to be at the coffee shop and somebody's going to be talking about a subject that you a year ago would have had no idea what it was. And then you're going to be like, oh yeah, I did a little bit of that. And before you know it, they're going to be like, well, are you interested in doing this? And it's just going to take you to that next level and you're going to continue to grow as a person.
100%. I think this really applies itself the understanding of it is self-awareness, right? It's understanding who you are in that moment, in that time frame, right? And I think this is a key point to bring in, is that, to your point, Shaun, social media allows you to not be aware of yourself and just spout off. It's like, you know, you have a megaphone, you're just walking around the street screaming out into the wind. But those that know how to use a megaphone correctly, or know how to utilize that tool in order to, you know, espouse a certain idea, aren't going to be screaming from the rooftops. They're going to be waiting for that right time. Well, there's a crowd. They've all come to see me. They're all here to talk about this particular topic. Okay, now I'm going to use the megaphone so everybody can hear me. Whereas that is a self-aware person. That's somebody that knows who they are. They knows what they know, and they're willing to share. Unfortunately, I think in the social media realm, and not just the media realm, but I think also in the Western society, we have a lot of people that want to be self-aware without taking the time to actually be self-aware. So you have a lot of people who are screaming at the clouds, basically, you know, old man shakes fist at cloud kind of deal, versus being able to sit and listen, being able to engage in a conversation openly and not have to get your point across by just being able to sit and listen. And to your point, Dean, when you were at SHOT Show and you were saying, I wish I could have taken notes fast enough, that shows that you were sitting there listening. You were actively trying to absorb information rather than being the guy. Like, you could have walked around SHOT Show all day long and been like, well, yeah, I'm here with the Special Forces Foundation. I'm a Green Beret. Let me tell you what's going to happen right now. Like, you could be that guy. There are people out there like that. But to be able to sit back and go, okay, I'm walking into this open. Hit me. What do you got? And then just absorb as much as you possibly can. And then realize, man, I should have recorded that afterwards, I think is a key point as well. Shaun, you got any additional thoughts on this?
I find it a really interesting balance. It's a puzzle, actually, to me, that I have yet to solve and probably never will solve. And that is, when I'm even in podcasts like this or in the three-dimensional space, if I bump into someone who's super cool and has a bunch more knowledge compared to me, and that's a loose reference if anyone's into the comparison game. If I bump into them, what I want to do is a one-way highway where I absorb all of their magnificence. But I know that I've got to do a two-way highway because that's the way I am. What I want, but what I have to do are two different things. So my want is, I'm just going to shut up and absorb their magnificence selfishly. But is it selfish? Because the moment that you absorb that selfish knowledge, now it's embedded in you. Now you're better for everyone else in the future. But you're only better if you use that wisdom wisely. You're only better if you take that knowledge and do better with the betterment that you just received. And so if you're pulling in all of the magnificence from the person who's in front of you, and then you never put it out to the world, what just happened? Nothing, except you're better for it, but no one else is the wiser for it. And so I find it difficult when I'm hanging out with cool people to actually try to two-way it, where I'm trying to hand out some of my minor wisdom to their major wisdom so that I feel like I'm kind of repaying them in a way. But all I want to do is just shut up and listen and absorb and be selfish in the moment. So I'm still trying to figure out the right balance. What do you think, Dean?
No, I mean, I think that's amazing for you to say. Unfortunately, a lot of people I meet, they can't wait to speak. You know, you can see them just sitting there starting to inch closer, you know, just waiting for that person to not speak and take as soon as they take a breath, I'm getting in there. And to me, the whole time I want to tell them to shut up, because I'm like, look, this is amazing. Write this down. Because it's just, because to your point, I'm also selfish. I really am. Like, I am one of those guys that I will literally take down every single great idea you have and make them my own, for sure. not in like a mean way or anything, but I'm just like, wow, that is amazing. How do I implement that into my life? That is great. Unfortunately, I'm not very creative. So I get a lot of my creativity from stealing it from other people and being like, okay, how can I make this Dean? How does this fit in my role? Giving back is always with my kiddos. I do a lot of mentorship with them. So that's my way of paying it forward to the next generation, is kind of setting them up and hopefully, teaching them all the mistakes I made and where I messed up and where I gained some really great experience, and being like, hey, I would take this and roll with it, so you're more successful in life than I am. Because the only man, I can't remember the exact saying, the only man you ever root for that outdoes you in every single way is your children or your son. So I find that to be absolutely true. I don't like I'm a little bit competitive. I don't like being outdone by other men. But the only two men in this world are both my sons that I hope crush me in every single way in life. Um, but yeah, but I do apologize, gentlemen. I do have to take off here in a minute. Speaking of the kiddos, I got to go pick up my youngest from school, but it has been an absolute pleasure. I enjoy being on here. I like listening to especially with Randy. I can't wait to link up with that guy. He just seemed like a huge wealth of knowledge. I'm just like, man, see, once again, me being selfish, I was like, I can steal so much from this guy. It's like,
Yes, you can.
I even got out my pen and paper because I was writing down some of the notes he was speaking about. I was like, dude, that is amazing.
That's
But
awesome.
I love networking. I love meeting new people, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast again. I truly do appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's truly our pleasure having you on here. We're going to get you on here near the end of February as well. We got with Nick. That's going to be awesome to have you guys on here again. Well, you on here again, but Nick for the first time. And I really do appreciate the convo. This has been just awesome. And I really, really appreciate you jumping in here last minute, just taking off from work and being able to jump in with
It
us.
was,
Thank your
it was the
boss.
exact
Make sure
excuse
your
I
boss
needed. I was
knows.
like, he has no idea, and he'll probably see it on social media. And I'd be like,
Uh,
sir,
Well,
it was
I
very
hope he
important.
does. I hope he does, because you did a hell of a job, and to your point, you're now serving in a better way after this conversation than you were before this conversation. So he should be giving you a round of applause and a pay
I
raise.
hope
And a pay raise.
exactly, and a pay raise. It's a good point, Shaun.
So,
All
well,
right.
then let's get some final thoughts on everything that we've talked about real quick, and then we can shut her down for the afternoon so you can take off. Anything at all still bubbling in the back of your head there, Dean, as a final thought before we shut her down?
No, great conversation. I can't wait to do it again.
Absolutely, Shaun. What about yourself? Final thoughts?
Thanks for showing up, Dean, and bringing the heat. And I'm glad you made it as long as you did. Really respect every minute that you gave us and gave to the community. So thanks.
100%. I don't have a whole lot to add on this, and the fact that as we better ourselves, we better our community, and that helps us everyone learn, build, and grow. We'll see you all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Hey Collective, Big Bird here. Thanks so much for watching the episode. Really appreciate the support. It has been fantastic recording these and having these conversations. I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to watch any other ones, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to listen to another awesome convo, I got one right here. Your choice. Chimo.